Thank you. Councillor Armour, is that a holdover? Thank you. Thank you. Those are your questions. Next we have Mike Mersch.
Yeah, I just wanted to just thank you all for being here. I have some general information. Some of the comments, which I also thought the report that was put together was excellent, are based on 2 medical studies, and the information there, if you looked in the footnote, are from a Nevada-based commission studies on MMA injuries that took place between 2002 and 2007 in Nevada. I actually have some folders for the committee. I can leave them with your staff that have the British Journal of Medicine medical study in its entirety, as well as the Johns Hopkins study, both based on that same information. Both studies conclude the exact same thing, which is that the incidences of injury overall are similar between MMA and boxing, but the incidences of traumatic brain injury, concussive syndromes, things of that nature, much lower in MMA compared with boxing. So I've got those in their entirety for you so that you can truly evaluate those or have any of your medical personnel evaluate those. Plus, I prefer not to carry these back on the plane, you know. But here's, I don't know how many you want. I've got more.
While Mike's handing those over, we're going to be around if there's any further questions after.
In fact, you do have a question from Councillor Meggs.
Thanks, Mr. Mersch. I don't know whether I thought you might be not sure what your corporate role is, but mine are of a less legal nature. But either of you can take them. The city site won't let me check, but I presume I know it's possible to bet on UFC bouts. And what controls do you put in place to make sure your bouts are not interfered with or tampered with from a betting perspective?
Well, first of all, there are certainly legal bets that are taken, for example, in the state of Nevada where sports gaming is legal. Our owners actually are in the gaming business. Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta are the owners of a company called Station Casinos. So they live within a highly regulated environment that requires them to live to the highest ethical, moral standards. We do everything we absolutely can to make sure there are no situations where somebody might be not giving their best in a particular fight to affect the outcome. Not aware of any situation where it's ever happened in one of our events, and I'm just not aware of it. One of the other things is we structure our purses for fighters where if you win, you get a bonus too. So there's a strong incentive for the fighters to win the fights. Once again, I don't think we've ever had a situation where it's occurred, but I can tell you that because our main owners live in a highly regulated environment, we're taking every precaution possible to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, my next question is in a different area, but it's linked. When we had an NBA franchise here, the Grizzlies they were called, due to various aspects of gaming legislation and so on, they made a significant commitment to amateur sport and to investment in the community, and it related in some respects to getting through BC law as it existed at the time with regard to prohibitions on sport betting and so forth. Of course, we have the Canucks, and we have the Lions, and they are locally, to a degree, locally owned franchises that invest a lot in amateur sport. Now, I understand they've got 80 games a year. You may do 1 or 2 events, but you've heard, I think, from others about our need to develop and regulate at the amateur level. And I'm wondering what MMA does in that regard, because you're already making quite a bit of money here from pay-per-view, and that's one of the reasons you've identified BC as an important spot to come. Is there any corporate effort that you make to support the development of properly regulated MMA at the hobby or amateur level? Because I think that's an area where we're not looking to, if this passes today, that's not something that's proposed, but I wonder if that MMA does anything in that regard to grow it up, because you're really benefiting from the fighters that come up. Are you investing in that?
Well, step back for a moment and tell you a little bit about it. And for whatever reason, our owners are not the type of guys who want to go out and talk a lot about their charitable activities, but I can tell you that we are a very community-involved company. We are very much involved in charities throughout the world and give significant amounts of money to charitable organizations. When it comes to amateur MMA, it's really an area where we really haven't been too active, and I'll tell you, it's probably a result of a couple of reasons. One, we feel it's a professional sport, and that's I should say we're involved in the professional side of sport, not the amateur side of sport. So we're not really involved in that space. But what we are involved in is and I think we've helped all of the traditional martial arts with the increased profile of the UFC, many of the martial arts like judo, karate, jiu-jitsu, taekwondo have all become more popular because kids who see this and they enjoy watching it on TV want to get involved in martial arts, and we actually think that's a great benefit to helping the traditional martial arts and increasing activity in those individual martial arts. So we've been sort of staying away from sort of promoting amateur mixed martial arts because we want to try to do whatever we can to sustain and help the traditional martial arts. Having said that, several states have put, as part of their regulatory environment, a fee that goes to support amateur sports. So for every ticket you sell, there is what they call an amateur MMA fee or boxing fee, whatever they call it in their particular jurisdiction, that would fund all sorts of things associated with the amateur side of the sport. So that's something a city or a province could do to sort of create a pool of money to help the amateur side of the sport.
All right, thanks. That's all my questions. But maybe I'll follow up with Mr. Hamill. Has there been any discussion in your experience? We've done boxing at a fairly modest level here, and I guess some professional wrestling. But has the city ever investigated the possibility of charging a seat fee that would support amateur sport in the city, or is that something that we just have never considered?
Maybe as through our business license fees, maybe when we report back next year, as I mentioned earlier, we could take that into account as well. Look at that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Meigs. Councillor Chow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Epstein, I was over here hearing what Councillor Meigs asking you a question, and you mentioned the words moral standards. Perhaps you'd like to share with us some of the moral standards issues or moral dilemmas that you run across when you try to convince people to put up forward this kind of a MMA fight. Would you be able to say something on that?
Sure, and I think I was talking about that in the context of Frank and Lorenzo Fertitter's gaming licenses in the United States, and but absolutely. I mean, I think the reality is that in the gaming environment, you live in a world where everything you do is seen by regulators. I mean, there's complete transparency when it comes to your financial dealings, who you associate yourself with, the type of person you are. Your personal life is not off limits. And so what that requires is for people that are involved in the gaming industry to frankly just live to a higher standard than anybody else has to live to. What that results in is, I think, making decisions that are both morally and ethically correct and are well reasoned and well thought out. I think when you talk about morals and ethics when you're involved in the sport, our athletes, I believe, are some of the greatest athletes in the world, and more important than their athleticism is who they are as people. About 75% of our athletes are college graduates. Why? Because most come from wrestling backgrounds. They were either collegiate or Olympic wrestlers, and so they've developed a level of intellectualism. They've developed a level of education that, frankly, is many times unique in sport. The other thing I think is important to talk about our athletes is that because they come from a martial arts background, I mean, every fighter comes from some martial art. As a central tenet of every martial art is the sort of the doctrine of respect. It's part of the ethos of any martial art. And so you have these athletes that are, as I said, some of the best conditioned, the greatest athletes in the world, and then you mix into that education, and you mix into that sort of this respect and sportsmanship that all martial arts have. I think that those who don't know a lot about the sport have an impression of it that's just wrong. And I think, what we do, and I probably should have done here today, is bring George St. Pierre or bring somebody else who is one of our athletes and have you listen to them, have them talk about how community involved they are, talk about their life experiences, and I think you'd really understand a lot better than the presentation that I could ever do about the quality of the people involved in the sport.
Because one of the negative opinion coming out would be, say, MMA promotes violence. So what would you say to that?
I would say that it's a contact sport. I'm not going to hide from that. But I would say what I said before, which is it's a contact sport that the athletes are well-conditioned, that they are educated, and that they're respectful. And that anybody who's actually watched a fight will see that after an event, there's a level of sportsmanship that you frankly don't see in a lot of other sports. And I'm not going to hide from the fact it's a contact sport. It is. But I think when you take a look at it in depth, and when you really get into it, you'll I think, very quickly understand this is not what it might seem to be on the surface. And so that's how I'd answer that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chow. Those are your questions.
Thank you very much. As I said, we'll be around for any further questions if you have them.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Harvey Jones.